When it comes to placing and collaging images in Photoshop, um, Photoshop's the native photo managing tool, so I could, if I have existing JPEGs or other files, just drag them in uh, to my Photoshop file, just like I do in InDesign or Illustrator. Um, that may, most likely, that's going to place this as a smart object. Some things that I can do with smart objects, or that I can't do with smart objects, that I can do with a rasterized layer. If the smart object is bothering you, you can always hold Control click and rasterize the layer and flatten it. That's one way, obviously, or maybe not obviously. If you have several Photoshop files open, I can come from the open file and drag that layer over to the other file that's open, and now my owl will be placed in Photoshop. So compositing or adding images in Photoshop is pretty natural. Um, an advantage that can happen with um, Photoshop that I can't get quite as easily with the other softwares is to use images as masks of each other. So if I bring in this pigeon PNG file and place it, thought I brought it in. So if I drag in this pigeon, oh, I have to hit return on that file, I think. Drag the pigeon in there, place, okay, there it is. I could use this pigeon as a clipping mask. Obviously, I have the standard blending options to play with, and I can see what images I get there. To duplicate layer, everything needs to be on its own layer in Photoshop, so I'm going to rasterize this too. To duplicate it, Command J will make a duplicate of a layer, and I can have multiple copies. But I can create a clipping mask of this owl using the pigeon. We looked at clipping masks in Illustrator. In InDesign, everything has to be placed in a box anyway. It's just a question of what shape is that box. But in Photoshop, I can use the pigeon to make a clipping mask. In Illustrator, the clipping mask needs to be in front of the thing that it's masking. In Photoshop, it needs to be behind it. And to do that, I hover, let me return here. And to do that, I hover over the space between those two layers, and then I'm holding Option here, and that gives me this little drop down arrow, and now my pigeon is a clipping mask for the owl. I need to make sure my blend mode isn't. I wonder how that. I don't know if that affects it. Just normal mode. But you see that I've got. I can move the owl layer. I can move the pigeon layer. Where I don't have the owl, I can see pigeon. So I could come in here and erase things, for instance, in that owl, and get components, get a little mix together. So a lot more control in terms of compositing and blending images together, but that's one of the advantages for Photoshop, is that using images as clipping masks.